everyone. I'm Rebecca.
Hi, Max.
And I'm still the spooky hippie. Welcome to our special Wottober episode on Flicker. This will be spoilery, so if you haven't read the books, you might want to back out now. Rebecca, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so like when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the whole, flicker sequence in The Great Hunt, and just, more broadly, like the concept of portal stones and mirror worlds, which for the most part is in The Great Hunt and does not appear much throughout the rest of the series. But it still sort of feels like or an interesting or significant part of the world building, the concept of the world in the Wheel of Time. So my question was sort of like, are they going to keep that in the show? Are they going to keep in this whole idea and use of portal stones, visiting a mirror world, or are they going to cut it? Because it occurs to me that they could not include it in the show adaptation, perhaps, because it only is limited to a few specific instances. Maybe they could not include it. And so my question is sort of like, should they include it? And if they didn't, like how would that affect the story? What would the consequences be of removing that aspect from the show?
I would certainly like them to keep it. If they don't, there's like little ramifications, but not much. As far as like the flicker scene itself, if they got rid of that entirely, it probably wouldn't affect much, except for maybe what the various characters experienced, and how kind of like the accepted initiate. The accepted test. They got to see various future realities, and that may have influenced how future events happened.
Okay.
Yeah. I too would like them to keep it. I mean, it does give us that "I win again, Loose Theron" iconic line.
It's iconic, yeah.
And I'd hate to lose it, but Glenn Buey will admit it really wouldn't hurt much to lose it. There wouldn't be a big ripple effect, because the flicker sequence doesn't really affect the story. I mean, the only thing that we need to keep from that entire sequence is just them going to the portal stone and them traveling to Tomon Head. That's all we really need. We don't need the actual sequence of what they experience. That series of events of what Rand sees doesn't need to happen, because what Rand sees doesn't really affect him great. It doesn't affect him greatly. It affects him, to an extent in his head. It reiterates what he already knows is going on, what he's fighting against. And it's just pounding home to him in his head: you're the Dragon Reborn. You're resisting this. Don't resist. But and it's part of what breaks down that barrier in his head of admitting who and what he is. And there are other ways to do that. And that's all that really is. That's all that really does, is that sequence does. And then that whole line from Matt: "I'll never betray you, Matt. I swear I'll never betray you."
Yeah.
There is another thing it does do.
What's that?
In the series, it takes like 3 months to travel.
Yeah.
So they instantaneously travel, but they took 3 months. So for us reading it, it gives us an idea of what took them so long, what they were experiencing during that downtime.
And it gives sort of Egwene ends up being, with the Shan-Chan longer, and we don't see most of it. We only see it for a couple of chapters, so there's like that time skip is in there. But it also gives like time for her to get there and to spend some time with the Shan-Chan, so that it actually serves like a number of purposes in the context of the Great Hunt. But your point about how like those things can perhaps be achieved other ways is definitely true. Like that's what an adaptation is all about, right? Like you think about like, what is this scene doing? What purposes is it serving? If we don't want to include it, how can we accomplish those same kinds of things in a different way?
Traveling, not traveling like gateways, but
Mhm.
riding a horse, you know, a couple of
Yeah.
people behind you with clappers, you know, like Monty Python,
Yes.
you know. I
You
mean,
know,
just old fashioned, take a couple of months riding horses across Randland.
Mhm.
You know, it's that easy. It would be, they took as long getting there as they would have if they had ridden horses across land.
I think a little
Sure.
longer.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. Right.
But you know, I would have personally like to see them actually include more portal stones in the adaptation.
Mhm.
Like use them more often instead of just kind of forgetting about them.
Well, that's sort of like part of the like what prompted this question is like, okay, so it's a little bit, you know, you have to look at it from the standpoint of production is like, do we want to go to the trouble of sort of like creating this concept and executing it if we're then not going to use it again? Like it doesn't then become like a major part of the fabric of the show. So that might be a reason to cut it. So another way to go with it is to use it more. That's sort of a different question, but
Yep.
you know, if they do decide to keep it in, then maybe we do get a little bit more of it. I mean, and even, you know, you could see more of, you mentioned Matt saying, hey, I'm not going to ever betray you, Rand. Like maybe we get to see why he says that.
Could it end up becoming just too much though at some point, do you think?
Yeah. I mean,
we will already have it for the whole Rand Loyal and Huron, when they go to the Grom world and they meet Selene.
Yeah, I mean, but that was part of my question is what if you cut that? You know what I mean? Like, is there some other way that Rand could meet Selene? Because essentially that's what that is doing. I mean, it breaks Rand off and forces him to start being in the leadership role. I think that's what that little side journey does. He gets him away from Ingtar. So he's then, he's taking on the role of leader and he meets Selene. These are the kind of really essential things I think that happen in that sequence.
And gets him to Cairhien alone.
It does, right? It gets him to Cairhien alone. And, but I have sort of wondered about, could they accomplish some of those things in a different way? I mean, for instance, I think Selene wanted to meet him, right? So she made that happen. But if she could do that in another way potentially. Like I think she would make sure that she met him. But I wondered if because in my mind, like they're sort of could potentially sort of combine the plots of the Great Hunt and the Dragon Reborn. So could Rand take off on his own deliberately in the second season, the way he does in the Dragon Reborn, instead of accidentally like he does in the Great Hunt? And then maybe you don't have that whole mirror world sequence happening.
Interesting. That might add some complications though in the writing still.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm, curious
that
about
make
how they handle
it more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's better to keep the portal stones to the extent of Rand, Huron, and Loyal ending up in the parallel world, the mirror world. Okay. Where I'm fine with cutting it personally, as much as I've been saying that the first two books are like a tower, a Jenga tower where it's really, really hard to pull anything out. This is one thing. It's that sequence, specifically the flicker sequence, can be cut. Or at least what you see of the flicker sequence can be cut. I mean, even if all that the show shows is Rand putting his hand on the portal stone, everybody standing around him, and then do like they did in Time Machine, where the day-night cycle spins by, It's light, then dark, light, dark, just in a rapid cycle. And everybody's standing around him, frozen in time as time speeds up around them. And not show anything else. Don't show what Rand is experiencing. Just wrap it in like 10 seconds. Cycle through 3 months worth of time of day nights.
To add on to that,
boom, 3 months, and they're in, all of a sudden, then they're at a different portal stone.
So Glenn, to add on to that, they could do like a reflection in their eyes to show what they're seeing. Just a very subtle, as that day-night cycle's going, you see a reflection in their eyes of a different reality kind of thing. Like a little TV screen by their eye.
That's interesting.
It'd be a nod to the fans without having to actually show much of anything.
See, for my part, like I think if they're keeping that trip to the mirror world with Huron and Loyal and Celine, I'm not sure there's a point in cutting out the flicker scene. Like I'd love for them to keep it. And like those visuals that you guys are describing of like, you can still include some of those things. Those would be cool. But I'd love to see it if they do include that. I mean, I have this whole theory about like combining books 2 and 3 and streamlining them. So that's like a separate video. We shouldn't get into all that. Go check that out on my channel, Reading the Pattern, if you're interested in that. But like, that's part of where
the
that
link will be in the description below.
Cut from the mirror world as well. But like, okay, so let's say, they don't cut that. They keep in the mirror world and they keep in the flicker. I think that kind of leads into some other questions. So maybe, we should go in a different direction then.
Well then, go ahead, Max.
I was going to say, one reason I would like them to keep it is, Wheel of Time isn't just high fantasy or low mid fantasy, what do you want to call it. It's also science fiction in a lot of aspects. And if we don't have any glimpse of the Age of Legends, we don't really have much reminder of this. And seeing other worlds, alien worlds, will kind of help say that this isn't just fantasy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then my question is, how should they adapt the flicker sequence itself? Max already gave a hint of this idea of the reflection in the eyes. Do you think that's the best way, Max, or do you think that they should do it in another way?
That would be a very budget-friendly way of doing it.
Okay.
I would prefer to see actual scenes for various characters, not just Rand. Full on, acted segments. A minute clip or 30 seconds at a shot showing different realities.
It's a new story.
Seeing, some of Matt's vision, some of Loyal's.
So new content that we don't know. Yeah, I like that. Rebecca?
I mean, I would love to see that. So I think the question is just like, how much time do they need in an episode to like cover these kinds of things? And so that we get it, so that the audience gets it, especially people who aren't familiar with it. But without like, I don't know, because in my mind, you could like take up an entire episode doing this potentially. But like, obviously, I think they don't want to do that. I think that would slow down things too much. So I'm just curious, like, I don't know, like how much time they need to really like do that in an effective way. Because in the book, it's like, you can just say like Rand lived a life doing this and he lived a life doing that, and you can explain a couple of them in more detail, but to actually show it would take a lot pages? More, if that. It's really not that long in the book, but you can cover the concept of all this time and all these different variations. And how do you do that in the show without taking up a lot of screen time?
So, on that regard, on that regard, you have in the books, this travel's taking place over 3 months. And we're kind of playing catch up where all the characters are at that time. So like if that first episode is covering that first 3 months, what Matt's doing, what Egwene's doing, what Nynaeve's doing, they could kind of go through each of their little character arcs and have flashbacks to, you know, Mad and Rand and all of them at the, well, not Mad and Rand, but, you know, at the thing, at the stone, going through their thing as they're catching up in time.
So are you sort of saying like, if they like
It
they
depends
could
if
intersperse it like with
Yeah.
other things that are happening? So like we don't just get all of the flicker sequence like
Yeah.
in a big chunk, but you
You
take
say
bits of
cut
it.
back and forth.
So like you
Okay.
have Egwene doing her stuff, and then Matt's, you know, has 3,000 lives in a bar.
Okay, but when you'd have to sort of, I think, establish like they're still at the stone, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd still see them in this like almost frozen pose at the stone, and then like you see the flicker in their eye, and then you like sort of zoom into that or something, and then you see like
Possible.
a glimpse of what they're seeing, but then it only lasts for a minute or something, and then
Maybe you don't even see them at the stone. Maybe you see them at the stone and then they flicker out of existence and like then flicker back into existence. And in that moment that they're out of existence, then you see, this is just spitballing here.
Yeah.
Then you see Rand lives as a soldier. You know, you see a shot of Rand walking out of Emmons Field, just a 2-second shot of him throwing his pack over his shoulders and walking off from Emmons Field. Just a 2-second shot. And then a couple second shot of where do you go? Andor, arriving in Andor. Just a couple second shot of him arriving in Andor or Camelin. And then a couple second shot of him in an Andorian army uniform. And then a couple second shot of him channeling or starting to channel. And just all the little things. It only takes a couple of seconds of a shot to establish each of these little steps that Jordan describes. I can't pull up any of the specifics. I should have opened my Kindle e-reader here. But each of these little things that Jordan describes Rand having done, you could establish each of these things with just a few moments of screen time and then jump. You know, montage. Yeah, do a montage. You know, montages are tried and true. They work and they keep using them because they work. Yeah. And it's something that they could easily do for Rand over and over and over again. Just 2 or 3 different montages, you know, Rand as a soldier and then starts channeling, going mad, whatever. Rand as a farmer, channeling, going mad, whatever. You know, each of these different things. And you only have to show 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4 of these and just hear, I win again, loose Theron. I win again, loose Theron. And just
so the way go ahead.
And then and you don't even have to show any more than that. After you've established the first couple of those, then you just do a shot camera here looking up at Rand's face, and you see whatever like lighting effect you want to do on his eyes, like any kind of flicker, and then you just keep hearing, I win again, loose Theron, I win again, loose Theron, over and over and over and over, like 10, 20 times, however many times, you know, the director and sound editor decide, just cycling that over and over to get the point across. This is happening over and over incessantly until everybody just collapses from exhaustion and Rand drops away from the portal stone, and all of a sudden they're at Tomon Head and they're a completely different location, and they're all just like, we're exhausted, we're just, what the hell has just happened to us? That was insane. Rand will never betray you, you know. And just like it could work, you know. And the only way to do it, I mean, the book was a montage. I mean, so the best way to do it would be to do a montage if you're gonna do it. But I do think it might be a waste of time.
Okay.
It's very probable. You know, one thought here was they could use this if they do multiple characters. They could add in some various minor prophecy stuff that we know happens, but also throw in a bunch of red herrings.
Okay.
A bunch of fun red herrings.
They certainly could have a lot of fun if they
Mhm.
if they do decide to keep it in, like with sort of like teasing the audience, potentially.
I mean, they could have several where Matt turns dark,
Hmm. Hmm.
or someone who we
Rand
know
turns
is a
dark.
dark friend doesn't have any scenes of him being a dark friend.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think the thing with like Rand, the way it's described in the book, it does work because like the first couple like are given like more detail and more explanation.
Mhm.
Like, so that his first couple examples of the lives that he sees are like lengthier, and then they do shorten up, and then there's just he does this, he does that, he does this, he does that, super quick, and then I win again, I win again, I win again. But yeah, it's I'm sure it could be done. I think it's just
I've
like,
tried to direct it in my head
but
for
would it
years.
be, like you said, would it be worth it if they don't put, a little bit more into it, right? Like, you can show it, but like, then the question would be like, okay, but why are we showing it, right? Like, what do we really want people to see from that? And so, maybe you need some time to make that a thing that's worthwhile. So it's
Yep.
hard to predict at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, time for my question then.
Mhm.
All right. 2 parts.
Mm.
What flicker scene do you want to see? And what movie or what song should be played to?
No, the song. I'm gonna let you go first, Glenn, if you have something.
I don't have a song.
We're gonna cycle back to that. Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
I'll
come
have
up
to
with
come
something.
back to the song, but I want to see Rand join the army. That's the one I want to see. I want to see him go off and be an Andorian soldier. I think it was Andor, wasn't it? That he went
Yeah.
joined as
Mhm.
the army.
Yeah,
That's the one I want to see him be a soldier for.
interesting. Yeah, I remember that like Elaine shows up a few times, like in those flickers. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I think, if they're going to do it at all, like I'd love it if we do see the other characters, right? The only thing that's tricky about that is like, I don't want to see Baron, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know, like they'd have to be very careful about showing Varens because I
Mhm.
feel like it would be too revealing. And perhaps like same thing with Ingtar, because I think it obviously has an impact on Ingtar, because like by the end of the Great Hunt, he's like, I think having seen that makes him even more desperate to like try to escape
Yep.
his oaths, because he sees that he tries and he fails again and again and again. So I mean, obviously I don't want them to reveal that about Ingtar.
I want Varen to wipe tears away from her face.
Mhm.
When they get done with the portal stone, I want her to wipe tears off of from her eyes.
Yeah.
That's the only clue I want, that she saw something bad of anything going on.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a subtle. I don't even want them to focus on her, a shot of her. I want her to be like back here, and the shot to be focusing on somebody here, and just in the background you see her wiping tears off of her eyes. So if you're not paying attention to the person in the foreground, you'll notice her doing that.
Okay.
Or on your second or third viewing of the episode, you'll notice her doing that. And only the people who've read the books or watching the show over again, if they make it all the way through the series, the series makes it all the way through the books, will put 2 and 2 together and understand why she's wiping tears from her eyes.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think they can get away with it because I think they could just, assuming it's relatively close to the book in terms of who's there, they could have it just be like Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and just those 3, and not everybody else. I mean, you obviously can't show everybody that's there, and like those would be like the most relevant of the characters that are there.
Right.
So if they stuck with just those 3, then and then like you said, put in little tiny clues about, because even in the book there's clues more so about Ingtar, not really about Baron, but there
Right.
there are clues about Ingtar.
Well, there was clues about Varen from the get-go.
True, but I don't think
I
there
mean,
was
that's
much in
why-
that particular sequence.
That's why
if
we
I-
had the purple Aja theories. Come on.
Yeah.
I was
Have
a
you figured out
believer.
a song yet?
No.
Man, see,
Okay, all right, I got my song. No, because so we're gonna do Perrin, and the wolves are gonna just keep showing up in there no matter what he does. And so we'll just play Werewolves of
10
London,
minutes.
and it'll be all good.
I'm not a music person, so I really can't come up with a song. I'm not the music sort of person. So
Right. Well, the scene I'd like to see doesn't happen in the books at all.
Okay.
It's an all Muppet version.
Ooh,
Just
Oh.
one random scene. They're all Muppets.
okay. Sure.
And the
Where the-
song,
Where the Leafcast would love you.
Exactly.
would be "Time After Time" by Cyndi Lauper.
Well, that's a good song. I like it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I was thinking something along the lines of Pink Floyd,
Mhm.
but
It takes
or
a long
Queen,
time to get to
or-
the words.
or Queen,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure really. So were there any books or movies outside of the Wheel of Time that deal with the idea of alternate timelines, alternate dimensions and realities that you think are particularly interesting while we're talking about the whole idea of this sort of concept?
For me, that would be, we have Sliders and his Dark Materials.
Yeah.
Sliders, we have a constant world where we have the same cast, but they're all in different roles. Each world they hop to. So he'll find his own version of himself doing something else. His Dark Materials is you don't really find many of the same people, kinda. It's just a completely different timeline, but worlds are different. Some are massively different.
Do you have one, Rebecca?
I don't really that I think is like that close to what we're talking about here. I mean, commenting on those, I think that what's sort of interesting is like, well, the hardest thing I find is trying to find something analogous to Wheel of Time, where like there's this concept of a multiverse that's built into it, but it's not like central to it, right? Like in Sliders, that's central to the whole concept of the show. But it is interesting, like you reminded me about like, oh, there are other versions of themselves. These other worlds are doing like wildly different things. And like, that's kind of true in what we see in the Flicker scene, but also the emphasis is on like the commonalities. What are the things that don't change, even in all these different iterations? So that's like interesting, just as a
In
concept.
Sliders,
Yeah.
Sliders, the thing that doesn't change is his intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
He's always
Yeah.
smart.
And
Yeah.
I think he almost always has the same mentor.
I didn't watch like a ton of Sliders. Like I watched some of it, but then I didn't like watch it all the way through. So I missed some of that probably. But it was a fun show. And then I mean, of course, like I mean, I always think of it somewhat more of like either like some of like the goofy examples that are out there, or just like, I mean, there's like tons of like time travel out there, which most of which I don't really care for. Like time travel has to be like really done well, or else I kind of hate it.
I get that.
So, but yeah,
But if it's done way too well, your brain's gonna explode.
Oh, well, I don't like that. Yeah, no, that's too much. Like the I have a
Tenet?
friend. I haven't even seen that, but I have a friend who's really into this movie called Primer.
Yep.
Which
That was on the list.
I kind of hate.
I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to watch it.
It'll break your brain, but I'm not
That's
sure
what
it's
everybody
worth-
said about Tenet.
I'm not sure it's worth breaking your brain over. So, but that's just my opinion. So I don't know.
I have heard so many really smart people who are science fiction geeks say Tenet is confusing. I
Okay.
watched it, and the only confusing part about it was the battlefield tactics and what's going on the battlefield. And those are confusing to me in normal situations. So I'm like,
Am I missing something?
what's confusing here? This makes absolute sense, everything else about this movie. But the one I want to mention is a very underrated, unknown novel by Ken Grimwood called Replay. It's about a 43-year-old guy who drops dead from a heart attack. And then wakes up in an 18-year-old body and lives his life over again. Till he drops dead of a heart attack. And lives his life again. Slightly different this time. Till he drops dead of a heart attack. Sorry about that. BB-8's butting in again. And then he drops dead of a heart attack and lives his life again differently. And this happens over and over and over. I'm not going to give away the whole story because there's a lot that happens with it, but it's a book that I think everybody should take a gander at. Replay by Ken Grimwood.
Mostly I'm curious about why he starts over at 18. Like, what about those first 18 years? But I guess I have to read it.
You have to read it. It's a pretty good one. Anybody else have any last comments?
I don't think so.
Nope.
Well, this has been a WoT the Adaptation Whacktober special on #Flickr. I hope everybody enjoyed, and we'll be back with another episode soon. Thanks for joining. You guys all have a great night, and don't forget to be awesome. Thanks for joining.